welcome back to the GMB. Welcome back to the Phil. Welcome back to another one of our iconic, historical, phenomenal Thursday debates. I hope everyone's doing well. It's great to see a lot of people here. SCR debate last year didn't get that much turnout, and I'm happy that quite a lot of people are here today. I hope everyone is healthy. I mean, I'll be honest. A lot of my lecturers are sick, and it's not good for them. I mean, for me, it's great because I get to miss class. Three lecturers have canceled on me this week. I mean, not canceled on me, but canceled on the class. And I feel kind of bad. I want everyone to wish them good health. I want everyone to be cautious when I'm saying. I want people, when people say they feel sick, tell them to get a vaccination. When people sneeze, please say bless you. I mean, we just want to be cautious. It's not a great time. If you have some Arabic speaking friends, tell them salam alaikum, something like this. It's gonna be, I think they'll love it. I don't think they'll love it actually. I don't know. Anyway, I'm gonna move forward. We have some absolutely riveting stuff this week. The Phil always has some riveting stuff. We're gonna start with my favorite, competitive debate. I mean, I love discourse. I don't know why you're laughing. I mean, do you not love discourse? Do you like discourse? I think she likes discourse. I love discourse. Discourse is my favorite thing ever. I might name my kid discourse. Honestly. This is not a joke. I mean, but speaking of competitive debating, exciting stuff always, as you guys have just seen. Novice training, Tuesday, 1800 to, I don't know why. 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Advanced training, Wednesday, 5 p.m. Finally, we have, I don't know why I wrote this, there's a group chat to join if you like competitive debating. So if you like competitive debating, you can find the link to join the group chat somewhere. It's in the link tree. Where's the link tree?
In the Instagram bio.
It's in the Instagram bio. Please check out the Instagram bio. I don't look at the Instagram bio, in all honesty. There's no point for me to look at the Instagram bio. Nonetheless, why should I look at the Instagram bio? Because there's plenty of things to sign up for. Freshers especially, please. We want people to show up. Secondly, my second thing I have is, and I won't forget this because Jonathan Kelly would often forget this. And first of all, I want to tribute Jonathan Kelly. I love Jonathan Kelly. You guys are laughing, but Jonathan Kelly, honestly, he's one of my role models. He would always forget women and gender minorities. I thought it was quite offensive of him. As a tribute to him, I'm not going to forget Liz. Kelly, you're welcome. In that spirit, I support, I'm an ally. Women and gender minority training, debate training. When is it? Wednesday, 6 to 7:30. Please be there if you're a woman and gender minority. Some people in the Phil know I have qualms with the term gender minority. Literally, because if you really think about gender minority, it includes men. Now, unfortunately, I did research before this, and I found out men are not included in gender minorities. Gender minorities pretty much means people that are not cisgender. So if you are one of the people that are not cisgender, gender minorities, as they are called apparently, this is comedy. The Eliz is there for you. Please go to Eliz debate training. I've never been because that would be weird if I went. Even though I do claim sometimes that I could go, but I don't go. That's a step too far, even for me. Okay, we're moving forward to an even better topic than Udoma. Now, the Udoma is about racial and ethnic minorities. Now, I might be preaching to the choir. I do see a few racial and ethnic minorities. I just want to call out the reality of this institution. The Udoma is there for you. For the people that are here, Udoma is there for you. They do have an event, public speaking contest, February 23rd, 7:30 p.m. Now, on a more serious note, I actually did do this last year. And the thing about the Udoma, on campus, there's not many places where, and like I said, I love the word discourse, but there's not many places on campus in which racial discourse, problems and issues that affect us all in a racial sense. I mean, it doesn't affect us all because not all of us are racial ethnic minorities, of course. But back to a serious note, look at the signups. Some of the prompts are actually quite profound. I did it last year. All seriousness, I actually really enjoyed doing it last year. Very low pressure. You can talk about these issues that are quite pertinent to us. And I mean, you don't get much opportunity on Trinity campus to kind of tackle these issues in a public, maybe not so public, but in a sense that is like beneficial. So yes, public speaking competition, February 23rd. They also, I'm not sure about this, Salma, you can correct me, but you guys have a collab with Formula Trinity on February 12th. Is Formula Trinity like the race team? Wow. Wow, that is a combo. It's called Diversity in STEM. Okay, so if there's any, did I hear something? If there's any racial and ethnic minorities that are also in STEM, we're really, I take it back. Everyone can go. I apologize. I thought the dome was exclusionary, but we would never be exclusionary. Moving forward. Bram Stoker Subcommittee. I actually love the Bram. I actually do love the Bram. This is like serious. This is serious. I love the Bram. Now, I don't think Stephen is here, because I would say to Stephen's face as well. Stephen is the chair of Bram, by the way. Bram Stoker Subcommittee, first of all, if you guys don't know what it is, it has nothing to do with Bram Stoker. I don't know why it's named after Bram Stoker. Pretty much students go up there, they present the paper that they wrote, they're usually academic, they're usually intellectual, something like this. The people that do Bram, people that present Bram papers are like consistently the smartest, the most intellectual, the most humble, in general, the most like people that you really want to look up to. On an unrelated note, I will be presenting a Bram paper next week. It's on the late Austro-Hungarian Empire. And I actually know Austro-Hungarian Empire, it's actually interesting for this debate. Just because the paper I will be tackling, and I'm sure I'm gonna be serious for a second, but it will be tackling the idea, the perception of the Austro-Hungarian Empire as a nationalistic inevitability in its decline, as in it was inevitable that it was gonna collapse. If you're interested in that stuff, I'm not sure many people will be interested, but if you are, please come. I will be speaking. It will be far more organized in this speech, but it's going to be very good. Stephen will also be giving us, Stephen's not here, but Stephen will also be giving a paper next week. I can't remember exactly what it's about. He told me a while ago, but I can't remember. I think it's on Northern Ireland or something like this. I'm just joking. When he told me, it was actually quite fascinating. So anyway, we're going to move forward. This is going very well, and I want to shift it. Did Liam come in? Is Liam in here? Oh no. Okay, we're canceling this part. This part is not happening. No. I'm just joking, Kelly. I appreciate your input. Freshers, is Killian in here? Killian, I'm going to shout you out now because you're a cool guy. Netflix and Phil, next Tuesday, 7 p.m. 10 Things I Hate About You. We will be watching the I Love You Baby scene in which he sings. I don't think Alana will like that, but we are going to watch that. Sea Swim also is tomorrow. It's been moved to 11 a.m. So if you want to swim, I mean, honestly, these kind of events, they're quite beneficial. If you want to talk to Phil people, like in a low pressure environment, like the afters and like the wine receptions, like it's always a bit cliquey, I'll be honest. But I mean, and I think everyone up there will agree with me. This is what we need to change about the Phil. Killian is doing it one CSUM at a time. Thank you, Killian. We appreciate you. Oh my God. Final thing. It's gonna be great. Wine reception after the debate. So we do have wine. We actually have plenty of wine. Team Stew is like the social events. Casper's also there. Casper, you came in. Thank you. We went up to Newry. We personally guaranteed that there's plenty of wine for everyone. I cannot guarantee wine glasses. Some of you guys may be drinking from plastic cups. You might be drinking from mugs. Maybe drinking from like pint beer glasses. But it will be wine. It'll be good wine. We have some good stuff. And I actually heard through the grapevine, we're gonna get some wine glasses. Jack, I don't know about update about this, but it's gonna happen, I believe. Oh, we ordered. Oh my god. Oh my god. We ordered wine glasses. This is great. I was just gonna say that the fill may not be incredibly efficient, but my mind has been changed. The fill is incredibly efficient. Wine glasses will be coming. Is there an estimate on the record?
No, it's being ordered on Monday, and it's like from like.
I take back my take back. The fill is overly bureaucratic and incredibly inefficient. Please, can we please get wine glasses? It's just kind of sad drinking plastic cups. What the heck? Okay, after the wine reception, we're going to Doyle's. Casper, is that in the upstairs? We're going to the upstairs of Doyle's after the wine reception, in which we'll be drinking out of plastic cups. We're gonna leave at like 9:30 or 10. I don't actually know. Last thing, actually no, I'm not supposed to announce this. Last thing, Kelly will have an announcement after this. Thank you guys. Thank you. I'm back. You cannot stop me. I'm gonna come again. Let's go. Now last week. This is gonna be comedic gold right here. Last week, the House put on the floor, this House regrets the actification of queer culture. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not well versed in like either of those things. In yassification or queer culture. And at the same time, I kind of want to deal with, I've heard some rumors, I hear some rumblings, I hear some whispers and some clandestine alleys, like, are there straight men specifically in the film? As a matter of fact, there is. I can stand for this. And that's also why I really don't want to comment much about this last week's debate. All I'm gonna say, I found it especially eye-opening. I learned some new things, and in the end, the motion failed. This House does not regret the yassification of queer culture. I'm gonna have to add some yassified words into my vocabulary sooner or later. That's what I got from that debate. Now we're gonna move on from that. This week, this House would abolish all borders. Now I actually find, and like genuinely actually find, this historical outlook on borders extremely fascinating. I mean, our modern conception of borders is so out of tune with historically, especially in like in the medieval period before we had modern nation states, or states in general, borders they didn't really exist. I mean, I wrote here that the territorially defined state came into modern formation with the Peace of Westphalia, which was in the early 1600s, 1637, something like this. And I mean, it's fascinating that we stand here today talking about abolishing all borders. I mean, the borders are such a new concept. Benedict Anderson, Imagine Communities, Liam knows what I'm talking about. Benedict Anderson, Imagine Communities, described the transition between territorially defined states to nation states. Now, I don't want to give a history lecture here. All I'm trying to say is that we live in the era of a nation state. We live in the era of borders. We live in an era where we have accepted, and it is literally what we grew up with. You know, Ireland, well, the Irish border maybe not, but that one may not be so set in stone. However, we grew up these conception of borders, and I'm actually genuinely looking forward to what both sides are going to say in this debate. I want to see what both sides are going to argue, what both people are going to talk about. I hope someone talks to Benedict Anderson. I really like Benedict Anderson. No one? And you guys, okay. Well, just say it anyway. Just say it anyway. Okay, what was the next thing? Oh, some important stuff. I have to welcome Oxford. Well, Oxford, welcome. We love you. Thank you. I mean, I have to say a few, I'm obligated to say a few things actually. University Philosophical Society is older than the Oxford Union, so that's one of the things. The next thing is, I just said quote unquote joke about English imperialism. So I'll say something like, of course, Oxford, the English are gonna talk about maintaining the borders that they drew. Something like this. That was a good one. Anyway, we're gonna move on. Oxford, welcome. Actually, welcome for coming. Welcome for coming. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. We appreciate you. Well, I don't know if we appreciate you, but we hopefully. I don't know much about you guys. But hopefully you guys appreciate our immense gratitude in this building. Yep. On a similar note, I want to welcome the SER. I don't have any jokes to say about the SER, to be honest. Thanks for coming. Thanks for helping organize. I saw on your Instagram that submissions are open until February 14th. Is that true? Okay, it's true. Check out their Instagram. I have no jokes to say about you guys, so look at our Instagram. If you're an economics student and you're interested, you have something interesting to write about, talk to the SDR people. They'll know what to do. And with that being said, no, Liam, I'm gonna have to talk to you later. I decided not to talk about you in my speech, so you're welcome. And there being no further business, the meeting was adjourned.
I'd like to call on the first speaker from proposition to open the debate.
Firstly, I would like to welcome my distinguished delegates from Oxford, and I would like to apologise on behalf of the student economic group. To be honest, I shouldn't be doing a British accent considering two of you aren't even British. But I would like to apologise on behalf of the student economic review. I know you guys got here all right, but your flights home have been booked for Rwanda. I'm really sorry. But it shouldn't be too bad. It seems like your government are sending a lot of people who cross the border there anyway. So I want everyone to close your eyes for a second. Close your eyes and picture a border. Maybe you're imagining a line. That probably means you're quite boring. Or maybe you're imagining Trinity's front gates, that border between, everyday, hardworking, bustling people just commuting on Dame Street and people who skip lectures and have yet to contribute much to society. I'm imagining that time I crossed the border between the main room and the sex dungeon in a Berlin nightclub in my first year of college. Or maybe, just maybe, you're thinking about the fact that borders are just boundaries to what we can know and experience. And that all noble human effort throughout history has really just been an effort to overcome these boundaries in various ways, like through the expansion of knowledge, political emancipation, or the most transgressional act of them all, loving another. But you can open your eyes. I don't think anyone closed their eyes. But to cut it short, I think today we're talking about political borders, like the border between France and Germany, for example. And I think we're talking about abolishing those borders. And when I say abolishing those borders, I do not mean like the world as one giant EU, as you probably just pictured it. No, because the EU still has internal borders that are policed. Instead, we would have the complete removal of nation states. And so too the visa requirements and legislation surrounding the manned and walled borders of today. So instead, you would have some sort of supranational government in place with regional jurisdictions. And the flow of people, capital goods, and unicorns, and all those other nice things would be completely unrestricted. Where one region's jurisdiction begins and another ends would instead be something more fluid, like where Cork and Kerry meet. And I think the example of the counties in Ireland is a good one because although you guys may not know, for centuries the counties in Ireland got on pretty well except for a few rough hurling games. And then that all changed as soon as a border was slapped up in the north. So anyway, I'll be talking about why abolishing borders is grounded in a moral basis, and secondly, why abolishing borders is in our best economic interests. Also, if I get time, why borders will divide us in the fight against a potential alien invasion, but that's only if I get time. So onto the immorality of borders. Borders discriminate based on where someone is born, mainly by confining those from the developing world to their regions, excluding them from the economic opportunities which they have largely helped to create through the various ways the developed world have exploited them in the last century. Borders perpetuate the suffering of those in the developing world by forcing People, millions actually every year, seeking a better life down dangerous avenues leading to abuse, humiliation, financial extortion, division of families, trauma and death at the hands of traffickers, border patrol, or due simply to desperate measures used to get to another country. And possibly the biggest disgrace of them all, people, some Irish students don't even get their J1 visas. And that's why I'm speaking here today. I'm still really salty about last year. But borders facilitate racism and conflict by enabling and justifying claims over land and people like that of the Kurdish or Basque or Irish or Ukrainian or any other oppressed separatist group throughout history. The abhorrent violence that continues to anchor Africa's development to this day can largely be attributed to the fact that colonialists let what must have been a crayon-wielding 5-year-old carve up a continent containing over 1 billion people. Just look at the complete waste of human life over the last 1,000 years, and today with Ukraine, due to some tyrant or monarch claiming that their border ended in someone else's back garden, to grasp the extent that borders are evil constructs. It's not enough to settle for open borders today, because an open border can always be closed to continue the suffering they cause. We only need to look at the fear the idea of a return to a hard border in the north of this country caused. Oxford are not here today because they crossed the Irish Sea on a plastic inflatable flamingo. Although kudos to you if you did that while being shot at by border patrol guards. But they're here because of a really frail border arrangement, and that could always take a turn for the worst. A border arrangement which is essentially like no border. I would like to now get on to why it's in our best economic interest to abolish borders. So I will admit, like when we stand up today and talk about, the morality of borders, it's not the case that borders, getting rid of them, will end discrimination or poverty or suffering like we talk about. But it would certainly go a long way in mitigating it, and I'll tell you why. Refugees and victims of trafficking would no longer be institutionalized or denied work through things like direct provision, which can drive them into crime rather than being positive contributors to our economy. The removal of borders would enable greater autonomy for groups within states identifying differently to administrate for themselves. A great thing considering the violence and division which borders so contribute to economic hindrance in the estimated value of billions annually. Laszlo could even establish a thriving Students for Change administration for the Trinity region if it got enough support. You see, we've actually kind of had a very imperfect form of relaxed borders since like 1817, and it's called globalization. The free movement of capital, goods, and labor, and unicorns, as I mentioned earlier, has helped to foster unprecedented innovation, cost reduction, growth, and has raised millions out of poverty within the last century alone. The evidence speaks for itself, guys. Britain has seen a rise in poverty, the loss of 290,000 jobs, import inflation, Liz Truss, and an estimated shrinkage in their economy by about £140 billion directly attributable to Brexit when they closed their border. What borders between Ireland and France, you may ask? Well, complete stupidity, I guess. Yous are making a show of yourselves, as we say in Dublin. Countries like Britain are increasingly closing their borders, and it seems to be coinciding with a slowdown in growth and authoritarianism. Given that the populations of the developed world are aging and will need to be taken care of, it would be economic negligence not to utilize the growing labor forces of the Southern Hemisphere. Our services will actually be constrained if we don't have the labor power to operate them, and we're seeing this already with the shortages of nurses and teachers. The real brain drain in this debate is the fact that millions of doctors and specialists around the globe are not being utilized where they're demanded. The real loss is the fact that so many countries are hindered by exchange rate fluctuations and financial crises stemming from non-integrated markets. We only have to look at Latin America. The real tragedy is that billions are spent each year globally on borders which could instead be invested in things like schools, transport, and housing. There's a border humanity must overcome, and it's the one we have put up for ourselves. For many around the world today, and after what I have told you, what lies on the other side of the border is hope.
Thank you very much for this speech, and I'm now calling the first speaker of the opposition.
The proposition has done an incredible job. They have begun by arguing that open borders and abolished borders are fundamentally different things, that abolished borders go further than open borders. And yet every single argument that I have heard from Mark's mouth has been for open borders, not for abolished ones. Let me tell you what abolishing borders gets you. It gets you chaos. You take the entire concept of a state altogether that has not existed since 1600. We've had empires for much, much longer than that. And at the edge of empires, what do you have? You have borders. The abolition of borders fundamentally destroys the concept of a government unless you want a world one. It is an example of the greatest excesses of anarchy and modern-day leftism. There are problems in the world, yes. There are many problems caused by borders. People are harmed by not being able to immigrate to wealthier countries, for example. But that doesn't mean we need to tear it all apart. That doesn't mean we should take every country in the world and be like, hey, you have no more government now. The thing with the proposition is that they have offered lots of problems and no solutions. I heard one vaguely hand-wavy line about how, we should have a world government split into regional parts or something. How does one have a world government split into regional parts when all of you can look at what we are sorry excuse for a world government right now, the United Nations? Let me be completely clear with you. The abolition of borders is not something to be taken lightly. The abolition of borders is not even close to open borders. Countries need jurisdictions to operate. You can't have a government that is just out in space randomly. You can't have a government with no territory. You can't have people be like, oh yes, this is my government. Oh wait, they don't like me. Okay, I'm going to switch to another government now, which allows crime, terrorism, murder, anything you want. I'm very happy if the yes, go ahead.
Do you want open borders or not?
This debate isn't about open borders. This debate is about abolishing borders. The proposition's job is to argue to abolish borders. Increased immigration is fine. Taking every border in the world and ripping it apart is not. You can cite the economic arguments for open borders, sure. You can. There are lots of good economic arguments that apply to increased immigration, especially increased high school immigration. There are lots of good economic arguments that say that Brexit was a bad idea. There are not good economic arguments that say we should rip apart Ireland, that say we should destroy Britain, that say take all of the institutions that these countries have created because they have stable functioning governments and tear them all down. All economic institutions are fundamentally based on political ones. All economic institutions are based on, for example, the rule of law. Why in the world would I want to build anything ever if some random country or some random, roving band, as what would happen in the anarchy you propose, not now, as some random roving band could just take it from me? The thing about borders is that borders allow countries and borders allow governments. Go ahead.
Why do we want to create something where private levels have written in the world before it currently passed the American?
Why would you want to create something if you have no if you have no government at all to defend you? If you have no government to defend the rights to create something? Why would you create something if it can be stolen from you at any time? Look at the poorest countries in the world. A pent-up demand for immigration, and so yes, I'll counter your open borders argument. Look at the poorest countries in the world. A pent-up demand for immigration from essentially every country on earth to the US and to Europe, especially people who don't have skills yet, who are untrained, just a massive flow of people, overwhelms housing, stops poor people in place, stops renters for, yeah, go ahead.
If there's a roving class leaving from Germany and Belgium, we can throw them in prison in Germany.
Sorry, who is the we that is throwing them in prison in Germany and Belgium? Because the thing that the affirmation would have you believe is that there is to be no more Germany, there is to be no more Belgium. There are regions in the so-called world government. So the proposition now has two ways to address this. You can either argue for a world government or you can argue for total anarchy. If you want to argue for total anarchy, please be my guest. And if you want to argue for a world government, we have seen how empires have quickly fallen as they become bigger and bigger. We have seen how corruption increases massively with the size of an empire. We have seen that you cannot simply create a government for the entire world with regional bodies and have this work at all. We have seen the United Nations. So yes, abolishing borders is a great way to send humanity back to where we are to essentially hunter-gatherers, to essentially roving bands. An international government will not work because an international government without internal borders is not really one that can enforce anything at all. Yes?
Large countries already take care of billions of people with borders, like India, like China. They're not anarchies. We can do this with a multi-country.
Yeah, so you sorry, give me a second. Compare India and China to the US and UK and then tell me exactly how you feel about borders then and exactly how you feel about doing this with another country. China was one of the most economically prosperous countries in the world for a pretty substantial fraction of human history, and yet the countries with strict borders with much smaller populations have done much better than them. My final point. My opponents can argue for open borders. My opponents can put forward economic arguments to open the borders, to allow immigration, fine. But my opponents are arguing for the abolition of borders. They are arguing to take all of them apart. And this is anarchy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I am now calling the second speaker of the proposition.
No, I don't. I think it'll be okay. Where did you leave yours when you spoke? See. Okay. Ready, set, go. I think Oxford need to put on their thinking caps. They spend a lot of time nitpicking the difference between abolition and open borders, right? I don't think the Phil really cares that much. But I also think that even if they argue for open borders, it's because they concede that borders are somewhat oppressive. I think if something is actively oppressing you, you should get rid of it entirely, not try to make it oppress you a little less. Like, what the fuck is that? Also, I think we can still have a police and like a government that works like the UN. Like, we don't have to stand over anarchy. Like, just please be serious. Okay. What has Mark told you about? I think Mark has told you about how abolishing borders can help marginalized groups across like the globe and how, but I also believe that abolishing borders can benefit the West, as one cannot win a debate against the Oxford Union without considering the most downtrodden group in society. Old, rich, white men. I believe that abolishing borders will be the only way we can tackle climate change, one of the deadliest threats to humanity, yet is oftentimes ignored when it comes time to policy making. I wasn't aware that this is an economics debate, but like, I think it should be said that like climate change is like bad for the economy because like, I don't know, like I feel like it just is. But my first point about abolishing borders will be how it will make it easier for climate refugees to find shelter. What's a climate refugee, you might ask? It's technically an oxymoron because according to the international law, they don't exist as they don't fall under the formal recognition of what a refugee should be. Which is kind of ironic if currently we consider that in Bangladesh, rising sea levels have left like 25.9 million people displaced. Countries like Ethiopia and Chad are amongst those who are also affected. Note this crisis disproportionately affects people in the global south, or developing world, as people say nowadays, because oftentimes they just don't have the infrastructure nor the political will and capital to deal with things like climate change, and also because they've just been fucking colonialized and messed about, which I'm not going to talk about too long because I'll never stop talking about it. I think people have been forced to leave their homelands due to things like droughts, hurricanes, and floods, but they're offered no legal protection, no formal refugee status. A world without borders is a world that shuts these people out, a world that ignores their pleas, and a world that leaves them to fend for themselves. The only thing harder than getting into Oxford is getting into Trinity. But definitely didn't get denied. But actually, the only thing harder than both of those is trying to go through a lengthy visa process when you have no money, no resources, no address, no legal recognition, and no formal refugee status. Sorry to get a little bit BP here, but basically in opposition's world, those guys, there's like a massive scale of impact on a really vulnerable group of people in society. That's as much BP debating as I'm gonna get. I promise I'm gonna get funnier again. If we remove borders now, it allows us to control the stream of incoming migrants coming, rather than wait for an inevitable crisis. We can plan for enough resources, housing, and for a smooth integration with a manageable amount of climate refugees. Note that the Institute for Economics and Peace has predicted that by 2050, we will have 1.2 billion climate refugees, again, refugees in quotation marks, because they don't have any legal protections, they don't have any legal safeguards, and they have no legal help. I think at that time, in opposition's world, that no border will be able to keep out this many people, despite how high Trump, nor Boris Johnson, nor insert random Tory fanatic, no matter how many walls they want to build. I'll take the point of information now, yeah? Okay. Anyone else have one? No. Okay. My second point is about how we get more government policies that are actually effective rather than the greenwashing we get today, right? I think abolishing borders would lead to an inevitable influx of migrants into the global north or the Western country. Like the other speaker told me, so many people are going to go to the US and the UK, and yeah, we definitely agree. But I think it's probably a good thing because the comparative, sorry to say a BP word again, is that these new migrants are just no longer be able to be pushed away and we become citizens of this new land. Think something like Pangea with a big Pangea government. I just don't think it's pirates running around. I think we can make it work. Really big countries like America work with people from different nationalities with different ideas and different things. And America probably isn't a great example because it's gone to shit. But in terms of a better example. Sorry, yeah, whichever one of you.
These so-called countries at the side, China, they only function with internal borders. They have internal states with borders, right?
I don't think there's an internal state between Manchester and fucking London. What are you talking about? Just be fucking serious. I just don't think Oxford people ever leave their mountains and interact with people in the real world. The only place with a border is the gates of your communist state. I'm sorry, right? No, thank you. I'll take it. Okay. I think that the local governments, the local Western governments, would be forced to provide care for these people. As for once, these individuals would be citizens who actually have the power to vote them out. I think this would force Western countries to finally take responsibility for their past omissions, as for once, they will be directly accountable to the victims of climate change. A world with borders, the world of opposition that Oxford wants us to live in, is a world without accountability. Despite the fact that climate change is common knowledge and we've been hearing about it since the 90s, literally nothing ever changes. No thank you. Over the last year, the US has doubled its oil rigs, and currently the Banshees and Flannery are better at enforcing the over-20s policy than the Paris Climate Change Agreement is at enforcing countries to do anything. So there's literally no incentive to stop using fossil fuels currently and destroying the planet, because renewable energy is seen as far too expensive and has a large upfront cost. So no country wants to be the one to invest in research or to invest in development that would help everyone because they can't find a way to sell it yet. And even if one country was to actually implement effective climate change policy, it would not be enough to drown out everyone else polluting. I'm really sorry for the timekeepers, but I'm going to go a little bit off topic here. Note, I also think abolishing borders would make it easier to deal with other issues, such as healthcare crises like COVID-19, where we need policies all around the world that work with each other and complement each other, rather than policies that take away from each other. Like we saw recently in COVID, some countries were enforcing vaccines and saying things like lockdowns, and other countries were doing fuck all, and COVID was really shitty. Most of us had to go through 2 years of online lectures. I didn't get a DEBS. If we were living in a Pangea state, I just think more people would have got to go to DEBS and people would not have died. That's also a bad thing. Okay, back to the climate change stuff. Back to the climate change stuff. I ultimately believe climate change is a global problem. It's one that we cannot solve unless we all work together. We cannot do that in a world that prioritizes arbitrary borders, arbitrary divisions, us versus them. I think it's a world that makes it far too easy to opt out in a world with no accountability. Before I go, I will leave with one last sentence. We must force the climate to change before the climate changes us.
With these words, I'm calling the second speaker of the conversation.
Sliding.
By tearing down all borders, we invite a storm where unfettered expansion of powerful groups and regions proliferate, where the protective guardianship of all nation states are going to fade, and the forgotten corners of our world wither in the shadow of neglect by the global government. In my speech, I want to do three things. One, I want to talk to you about why it's so problematic that we want the breakdown of the state and all of the functions and benefits that it currently provides to the globe. Secondly, I want to talk to you about the economic benefits and harms of when we take down borders. And thirdly, I just want to talk about how the migrants that they so deeply want to defend on Team Proposition are probably going to lead a worse life, both if they were to crowd to places like New York City, where the rest of the world is also crowding to, or for those who decide to stay behind their hometowns that are now forgotten by this global government that they want to defend. But before all that, I want to just clarify at the top of this speech that, yeah, we might be from Oxford, but the truth be told, none of us are British, so we don't necessarily have to defend the horribly drawn lines drawn by the British government. We think that borders itself are a great concept, but maybe not the ones that are drawn by our imperial overlords. We don't necessarily want to defend that on our side of the house either, but we think that overall having borders as a whole concept is one that is beneficial to the entire world, not at this moment. So first, I want to talk to you about why the breakdown of the state is so problematic, because the breakdown of the state leads to a collapse of all of the services that it currently provides to everybody who is a citizen of their country. This includes things like welfare, like healthcare, like infrastructure. And note that if they want to talk to you about climate change on their side, that necessarily involves governments having the incentive and the ability to pour in billions of dollars to develop those infrastructures built for climate change within their own countries. If you have one global government, I highly doubt that's going to do anything for anyone in the world. The UN is probably the least active group of individuals in the world when it comes to climate change. But now they want to divert all the resources to something like a global government that probably cares even less about the world in the state that it currently is. So I think necessarily you need to have a breakdown of power. You need to assign specific goals given to specific countries. And if you leave it all to something like the UN, you've seen how often they neglect responsibility. It's a horror show if you give all of these responsibilities to the United Nations. The second thing that I want to talk about is why there's going to be worsening inequality. Because yes, they're currently right to say that there are some, not at this moment, there are some people who live in conditions of poverty, and so you should give them more, allow them more access to like richer places in the world. Here's why that's a problem. Because everyone else in the world is also thinking the exact same thing. You get billions of people trying to flood into places like Los Angeles or New York City, thereby driving out any ability of economic progress or growth in those regions. When you have massive overpopulation, that's when your employers take that as an opportunity to lower your wages down to as close to zero as humanly possible. That's when you're going to get things like a massive overcrowding of any access to social resources, to housing, to any kinds of things that would uplift your standard of living. You no longer get access to that because it's so overcrowded, there's no possibility of you trying to outcompete the other person. So it becomes a race to the bottom to see who can undercut these poor migrants the most. The living standards of even the best places in the world begin to falter. But what's even worse on their side of the house is this, that those who choose not to leave are even further forgotten by this global government by theirs. That not everybody in the global south is able to now flock to New York. A lot of them are left behind. But now this global government cares about them even less, because not only do they not have a regional government that used to care for them within borders, they now no longer have that regional responsibility to care for them. But when you look to the global government, they don't care about those unforgotten corners of the world at all. They don't need to be accountable to them. They only have to be accountable to 51% of the world. They can completely neglect 49% of the world and still be re-elected. So we think that's a crucial problem that they haven't yet to deal with. Before I go on, I can take a point from either of you.
In Florida and Dublin, you currently have local governments. There's so many local countries that we have a realistic issue
I would love to engage with that because you actually can't defend that. Because if you're going to defend regional governments, that necessarily requires drawing borders to some extent. You are defending abolishing borders. You cannot say we'll have regional borders. Then you're defending the country system that we currently have right now. Like a global government divided into little regions is literally the system of nation states and countries that we are saying that you guys cannot stand behind. So do not try to get away with a definition such as that. The next thing that I want to talk about, thirdly, is a bunch of economics that they told me I needed to talk about that I don't really want to talk about, but I'm going to bring them up anyway. Here's why there's an infeasibility of economic integration. Because let's put aside the whole let's borders versus open borders thing. Let's just look at the fact that economic integration overall, when you destroy borders, is very, very problematic. Look to the example of Greece, where because you lose independence of currency and because you lose independence of monetary policy, you're unable to adjust with proper adjustments how you get your economy to grow. For example, presumably on their side, when they have no more borders and no more regional governments, you're using one global currency that fluctuates at a value in which most countries do not get to individually decide. So let's say you're currently operating at a recession, you cannot adjust your monetary policy in order for them to accommodate to that particular region. So problematically for them, they bring about things like Greece's liquidity crisis, in which their integration to the EEC meant that they were in massive debt, meant that they couldn't use policies in their back pocket to adjust that economy. It led to a massive humanitarian crisis in Greece, presumably because they were not able to adjust their economic policies according to their own national interests. You get that, but you get that on a much bigger scale when you abolish all borders. The entire global south is unable to control the value of their currency when it's the global north and their corporations that generally determine how their economies work. The next thing about why the economy thing doesn't necessarily work out is also because these governments, we are going to exacerbate and entrench current power disparities in the world. They give you the example of why the British colonialism was such a big problem. You get that, but 100 times worse on their side. Because now, countries that are currently very powerful, think China, think Russia, think the US, now get to expand their tentacles throughout the entire world without any repercussions whatsoever. With the breakdown of the state, there are no militaries telling you can't do this. There's no national sentiment fighting against you when Russia tries to invade Ukraine, for instance. Now, Russia can literally just walk next door and claim every resource that Ukraine currently has and say this is now ours because there are no borders between Russia and Ukraine now. So you allow all the global dictators to expand their powers and their tentacles into literally every section of the world and do whatever they want. And do not get us wrong on this point, because they're going to not have any interest at all to care for the people that they're exploiting. Note that the British Empire did not redistribute their wealth to the poorer countries from which they were extracting resources. All that wealth was concentrated in the hands of the few. You get that, but much worse on their side when it is Russia, it is China, it is the US, currently very powerful countries and regions and leaders who now get to expand all of their power and concentrate it in those particular regions that they so deeply want to invest in. So problematically, for all of these reasons, that's not a good policy. So let me conclude with this. The last time we tried to disrespect the sanctity of the borders, we opened ourselves to the theory of colonialism, where every single powerful actor got to extract whatever they wanted and keep the benefits for themselves. And if even that does not convince you what a terrible idea this is, look to the modern rise of globalism, where the wealth of the richest 5% tripled in the last couple of years, while the global poor continue to survive in increased poverty. That is the reality, and do not let propositions idealistic daydreaming deserve you from the truth. Thank you.
Thank you. I am now calling the third and last speaker for the proposition.
If it falls, I'll speak from the heart. Guys, I have a confession to make. I'm in an awkward situation because as a summary speaker, I should be responding to everybody, but I actually agree with a couple of the speakers before. The one that I want to reference is not the Oxford ones, they were just waffling. I want to talk about the chair, because yes, my name is Andy, and that name wasn't found relevance for me. It was likely one of the first words uttered when I was born. It's a collection of sounds echoed every single time I sit in a classroom or a debating theater or the drunk tank or one of my friends picks me up. The reason why people call me Andy is not particularly clear. I mean, there's no real special certainty to it, or at least no good one. It was an arbitrary factor assigned at birth without my consent. But I like my name. 5 years ago, there were two people
in the US named Gay Bowser. There are now no people named Gay Bowser. I wonder why. They didn't die. They changed their name. But one's quality of life is inhibited by factors outside of their control. Every single time someone bullies them, by calling them Gay Bowser, you take away their dignity. It's only legitimate the one should be able to escape that bullying to change their name. I'm Irish. The fact that I'm Irish is relevant consistently for my life. It was a fact decided prior to my birth, which I can change. I can leave the yoke of this state and reject my Irishness. But if I was Somalian, the issue is not so simple. I can get on the back of a jeep and cross a desert and traverse a terrible sea in search of a better life with people like me. But unlike when I tried to change my name, I need not be afforded a new nationality. Indeed, fortress Europe borders leave me without nationality, without name, without dignity. The arguments made from this opposition are frankly ridiculous. They talk to you about roving bands of scavengers traversing the continent, stealing people's businesses. They talk to you about how overcrowding of immigrants is going to now occur in cities like New York and London. It already occurs on the coasts of Greece and Italy, because when you are desperate and when you are destitute, you will not wait for somebody to let you in. You are going to move regardless. And what currently happens, no thank you, is when you end up in the nearest location where you could not move beyond, when you are not able to get further to somewhere that gives you an opportunity, you end up in poorer countries which are unable to account for you, which cannot give you the welfare you need, which cannot give you a proper provision centre, which leave you destitute in a disgusting condition like our country does to this day. What do they talk about instead of the actual issues in this debate, the issues which we talk about in Mark and Hillary's speech, the issues that face immigrants, the issues that face economies worldwide? They ask a bunch of questions about how this will be done. Now, think about this for a second, guys. This is literally the single biggest change in policy ever enacted. There will be a lot of debate about this, a lot of discussion, there will be compromise, and there will be experts coming in discussing this. And now they want us to say in 7 to 20 minutes exactly how we're going to reorder every single border in the world. This is absurd. We think that the only way that we can discuss this is not through the method of the how, but through the method of the why. But, no thank you, I will engage on these grounds they want us to talk in 3 respects. The first thing they said is that we cannot have world government. If the empire is too big, as their first speaker says, then world government will not be able to occur, and we will have bandits roaming our streets, stealing our businesses. As I pointed out to the first speaker, and I feel why, we already have large countries, which aren't Mad Max Fury Road, right? We don't have people ripping along the street, shooting flamethrowers out of guitars. The first speaker comes from India. The second speaker has studies in the US. Each person's vote in these areas, where these countries are massively large, diverse, and have an enormous amount of decentralized governance, is not incredibly sacrosanct. You don't have control over every single person who is within that government, but you're able to still have police, still have laws. Consider the scenario. If I kill someone in Arkansas and I move to Florida, then they put me in a wanted poster, they put that on the internet, and then they track me down to where I go to. The problem with their argument about returning to the state of nature is we are no longer in the state of nature, ladies and gentlemen. We have moved beyond this, and there are ways that we can deal with the new modern problems which face us in this world. And for them to point to these sorts of problems of, well, what happens when you move from Arkansas, when you move from like Kerry to Cork? That's technically a border. They've moved from at the beginning of their first speech talking about open borders within the EU to talking about like the border between Cork and Kerry. What's next? The border between like the Hist and the Phil? They don't understand what this debate is truly about. And because they keep shifting on this, it's a sign of a side that just don't really understand what's at the heart of this debate. Of course, we're able to have some degree of difference between one area and another. We're not going to merge we're not going to immediately agree that there's no such thing as a city, a town, or anything that exists. There will be some degree of division between one house and another house. I don't understand why suddenly we're going to have to decide that there are no governments because we have to have one sort of global overlooker. No, thank you. But I want to talk about that global overlord that they talk about, because they seem to think that it's so bad, but they never really tell us why, beyond 2 things they say. The first is that they can ignore people, because you only need to win 51% of the world vote in order to control everybody.
That is exactly what happens in every single country in the world that is democratic right now. And notice as well, there are many countries in the world which are just not democratic at all, in which case you don't need to win over 51%, you need to win over the wealthiest 1% or the most powerful 1%. If we are able to move further away from this tyranny, even if it is a global one, it is one that we should acknowledge. The last thing they say is that no one will keep a global government accountable. I will respond to this in a second, but firstly the POI. Yes, you're pretty good. No? No? Okay, cool. So the last thing they say then is that global government is not going to be kept accountable. And the extent of the argument here is just to say, guys, the UN exists and the UN is not great. But if you actually look at what they said, the reason why the UN doesn't work is, in a large degree, is because we have states, and people defer to the states that currently exist. You're not going to listen to international law if the law within your own country has greater jurisdiction, is more powerful, is more proximate, and you understand it more. But if it is the case, it is the only option that exists, then you have to turn to these forms of global governance. Their problem was not one of the ability to institute this policy, it was a problem of imagination. That was something which struck them down their bench. What I want you to focus on at the end of this debate are not squabbles over whether or not we're going to be able to iron out the integration of businesses over a 10-year difference, right? Because these issues will be sorted out by people probably smarter than anybody speaking in this debate over a very long period of time with a lot more resources than many of us have. What you should actually adjudicate this debate on is what is the problem which we are currently facing. The issue that we have is a lack of dignity for those who will be denied their rights as global sea levels rise in Lagos and move 15 million people out of their homes. They will not form an orderly queue. They will not get onto a life raft. They're going to flood into cities and countries no matter what. The only way we can protect the dignity of those who are constrained by the Leviathan of borders is to remove them. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm now calling the third and final speaker of the opposition.
Why am I can't breathe. Okay. Great start. Okay. Right. Before I begin, I feel my first task as an Englishman speaking in Ireland is to say I'm dreadfully sorry. Yeah, you guys are doing a great job without us. Carry on. Such a good job, in fact, that my sister is trying to flee England to come to this very university. She wants to apply for medicine. My dad said I had to ask. So if there's any med students in the room, I know they're probably in the library. Please can you come and give me some advice for her afterwards? Yeah, thank you. Okay, now on to the actual speech. So I got two jobs and two things I'm going to do in this speech, right? First, I'm going to tell you why borders are inherently human. They are a fundamental element of human history and humankind, and we can't do the world without borders. It just doesn't exist. It's not real, right? And then, in the second half of my speech, I'm going to summarize the debate so far and explain to you why we've won, right? So, argument one. Why are borders inherently human, right? We heard from the registrar in the introduction, right? Borders were only invented in 1600 and whatever, right? It's not true, okay? We might have coined the word border in 1600 and something, right? But borders existed before. Rome had a border, okay? Ancient Egypt had a border, right? Okay, just because the word border didn't exist doesn't mean we didn't have the concept of borders, okay? Borders were there before, and they will be here for all of human history, right? The history of mankind, the history of human beings, is us stabbing each other over what borders look like, right? That's our history, and you can't change that. I wish we could, okay? This sounds amazing. No, thank you. No, thank you. This sounds amazing. I want to live here. This sounds great. This magical mystery world where there's no war and there's no conflict and everybody gets along and we have this massive, great global government where everyone's happy. It's not real, okay? It's not real, okay? Human beings, we like to stab each other and we like to kill each other and we like to take more power. We like to take power. It's in our nature. And even with all the mechanisms of the international order that we've created, people still violate it. People still cross borders and try and take more power. If you get rid of the lines altogether, it just crumbles, right? We heard in the second speech what's going to happen, okay? The Chinese are going to get in a boat and they're going to go to Taiwan and they're going to take all the semiconductors, right? No more iPhones for you, okay? The Chinese have them all now, okay? You don't get them anymore, okay? Because this global government doesn't exist, right? The Americans are going to march straight over to Canada and they're going to take it over, okay? No more French-speaking Canada, it's all America now, okay? That's what this world looks like. It's not real, okay? It's not real, you can't have it, okay? I mean, in that sort of, no, that was me. Cultures will always exist. Human societies and languages and dialects and subcultures. Yes, go on. That is not the only reason borders exist. It's not. That's the reason borders in their current form exist. But borders existed before the concept of colonialism was created. Borders existed before we even coined these words. Borders existed when Jesus was around, right? Borders are old. Borders are inherently human, right? We draw borders at, right? Okay, you talked earlier about these large countries, China, India, the United States, that don't have borders, right? This is my hastily drawn map of the United States, okay? Right? Look at all these borders on the inside as well. Okay, look, you've got New York, and you've got California, and you've got Texas. Right? You want to manage these great big states. India has like 50 states, right? China has subdivided regions. You talked about, we can manage these large countries without borders. No, you can't. You need even more borders. So how is this going to work on the whole global scale? Somebody's going to go, okay, here's the world map. Oh, there's no borders. Oh, no. Oh, but how do I make sure that Australians are getting enough food? Okay, what if we just create a region there? Okay, now we go to Africa, just create a region. And then you keep creating regions. And what have you got 20 years later? You've got borders, okay? We're back where we started. It's the same thing. It's not real, okay? And I had so much stuff and I'm not going to get to it. Oh, that's really sad. Okay, world government, right? Their entire case hinges on the existence of this world government, right? You can't have anything they say unless you have a functional world government, okay? You can't have a functional world government. You just can't. Governments suck, right? Government is awful. Even the local Birmingham City Council is bankrupt, okay? Right? Tiny governments are garbage, right? They struggle, right? Society committees are garbage. They can't even get enough money to run things, right? So then make it bigger. Make it bigger. Oh, it's worse. Make it bigger. It's worse. When you get to the whole government of the whole entire world, it's awful, right? Say you elect a world president, right? Say you make me world president. I think I do a great job, right? Say you make me world president. How on God's green earth am I meant to know what some random guy in Mali needs, okay? I can't do it. I'm one person. It's one sort of government at the top. It's just the global elites that we heard so much of the colonialists and the Oxford people, which, apparently we're so evil, right? It's us who's going to be in charge. Sorry to break it to you. That's what happened. It's us and the rich Americans with their ChatGPT and all that, right? They're the ones who are going to be in charge. Do you trust them to be in charge of the entire world? No, I don't. Okay? At least now, if you don't like them, you can unelect them in your own local area. But you can't undo the entire world government. Good luck as an individual trying to defeat the great world order. You can't do it. It's not possible, okay? Take a breath. Okay. To summarize, I had so much more stuff that I didn't get to. This is really sad. Anyway, I would love to live in this great magical mystery world that side props presented to you, where the borders are rainbows and a unicorn flies over every now and then to check everything's functioning okay, right? This sounds amazing, but you can't have it. I'm sorry to break it to you. You live on planet Earth in the real world with human beings who are stupid and useless, okay? You can't have this great, wonderful, magical mystery world. It doesn't exist, and it's not real, okay? And as much as I would love to have it, as much as their case hinges on this world government that would never function, I wish life was better for migrants. I wish we could let them all in, and I wish the UK could become home to every climate refugee on the planet. It doesn't work, okay? Side proposition is selling you a pipe dream. They're selling you a myth, and it's a great myth, and I wish it was true. But we are telling you how the world actually functions. We're telling you what's real. And as I've run out of time, I urge you, as we end this debate, to think about the world you actually live in, not some pipe dream unicorn fairy tale land which they want you to believe is real. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thanks to all the speakers for a very engaging debate. Both sides brought forward very, very strong and mostly well-reasoned arguments, entertained us well, and even as someone who has been studying migration for many years, I can say I definitely learned something today. So I'm standing here today as, first of all, an economist who studies the economic effects of migration. But as you can hear from my accent, manners, whatever else, I'm an immigrant myself. In fact, I came here in 2008 as a single male, military-aged, unvetted immigrant, as some people say these days, to study here at my alma mater. And it's obviously, or what is now my alma mater, and it's obviously a great honor to be here. Now, let me tell you a little bit, or provide you with a little bit of context of how economists, as in those who pay their bills from doing economic research, actually think about migration. And that obviously will pick up quite some of the arguments that have been put forward by both sides today. So, economists rarely agree on anything, right? There's always, the answer is, it depends. Whatever policy we discuss, whatever we think is the best for a country or a group of people, there's always some economists who will say, no, this is not the case. When it comes to migration, when it comes to open borders, very important distinction to no borders at all, as in when it comes to the opportunity for everyone who wants to migrate to actually migrate, is this for the global economy a good thing or a bad thing? As in, is this good or bad for global prosperity? And that's where most economists, if not all, agree on, that this is actually very positive. Or in other words, the current migration restrictions that we see, that every country has, and if you don't believe that they exist because you've lived most of your life in the EU, well, just ask some of your fellow students who come from countries outside the EU how hard it is to actually even just get a visa to come here to Ireland, or that quick trip to France, to the Schengen zone, forget about it. So borders are there, migration restrictions are there, and compared to other international flows, we restrict migration an awful lot. So we don't restrict capital flows a lot. We don't restrict trade flows a lot, right? We have a situation where workers somewhere in this world produce goods that we then consume, but those goods get shipped here, but we don't allow those workers to come here and have their own share of our prosperity, or at least we don't allow it don't allow them to come as they wish and in large numbers. So the question is, what would be the economic effects to get rid of all migration restrictions? That's obviously a difficult question to answer because we've never experienced free migration. So the question is, how many people would actually migrate? How many people would voluntarily migrate? Right? If we lifted all borders tomorrow, this would be not refugees, but these would be people who voluntarily migrate. How many would that be? Everyone who can improve their standard of living migrate? Probably not. So there are some estimates based on the Gallup World Poll that suggest it might be in the order of 400 million additional migrants. Whether you believe this number or not, but it would mean that the current number of migrants in the world would more than double. That's quite a big number, and as some of the speakers said today, these migrants will likely go to a couple of places. Whether they go to exactly these cities, that's a different question. And so The other question then is, what is the global welfare effect? What is the effect on global prosperity? And there are some estimates out there. The more conservative ones are something like in the order between 12 and 20%. Some say higher because they assume there is more migration. So global GDP would increase, but that would also mean global prosperity would increase a lot. The economist Michael Clements, who has written very, very insightful articles and has had an impressive research agenda on this topic, calls one of his papers on migration trillion-dollar bills on the sidewalk. As in, compared to other restrictions that we could lift, trade restrictions and so on, migration restrictions are really the ones that would have a huge effect, a huge positive effect on global GDP. So why don't we go and just pick up those trillion-dollar bills if they're just there? And that's where economists start to disagree. That's where we no longer can agree. And I mean, one of the challenges is that those gains are very unevenly distributed. And I don't want to tell a story here about, poor people and rich people and so on, but we should obviously look, first of all, at the sending countries, where there is always this notion that when high-skilled workers leave, there's a brain drain, this must be detrimental. Study after study has shown that this tends to be not true. And there could be some cases where this is true, but typically the losses from losing some of its people are offset by some of the gains through remittances, technology transfers, knowledge transfers, return migration, investment, and so on. So for the sending countries, free migration will probably not be such a big deal, although we don't know what would happen if many more migrants would leave. Then we have the migrants themselves, and they are the ones who benefit by far the most from migration. So the vast majority of these global gains from migration go to the migrants themselves. One could also say free migration would be the biggest poverty reduction program in the world. Because what we do is, instead of trapping people who could be very productive somewhere else and could have a high living standard somewhere else, we trap them in countries where they can't prosper that much. So they gain massively from migration. So now we have the sending countries don't gain overly much, but they also don't lose. The migrants gain a lot. But what about the receiving countries? And that's where it gets really tricky, because obviously it's the receiving countries. Those countries where migrants typically go are those that instate the borders and enforce them. And here it gets really tricky, because study after study in the last 30 years has shown that the economic effects of immigration in most countries are fairly small. Those fears that migrants depress wages, steal native jobs, they tend to be unfounded. We don't find in many studies big effects on crime, or even on house prices, believe it or not. So how can it be then that most receiving countries restrict migration so heavily? And here comes a point where, as economists who do research on this topic, we have to somehow shrug our shoulders and say, we don't actually know so much about this. We can say, well, it's all politics, it's people care more about social cohesion, they have preferences for homogeneity, they want to share public spaces, public goods with people they're like. Yeah, maybe. And that might actually be something is something we need to study a lot more. And as economists, we have a toolbox for this, or we have at least a framework that allows us to think about this, and that's called willingness to pay. So for example, there is in most receiving countries, think about the UK, think about the US, think about here in Ireland, there is a large number of people for whom having people from a different ethnic background around just is what economists call a disamenity. So it affects them negatively in some way, whether we like this or not. It doesn't affect us who live in a global city and enjoy being here. For us, this is positive. but for many others it's negative. The problem is, though, we don't know just how negative it is for many people. And so it may well be that immigration has no negative effect on a lot of the economic indicators that we typically study, but in some other ways, it negatively affects voters. And I know that this is quite a sobering message, but the message here is we need to understand better how important these preferences really are and what we can do to maybe change that and lift migration restrictions. We don't need to lift them right away everywhere around the globe, have unlimited immigration, but given these massive gains, we should try and look into reaping them, even if we do it gradually and if we don't do it to the extent that, that some of the speakers have advocated for it. And so when you go out into the world and do research, write master thesis, write PhD thesis, or even just think about this issue, I invite you to join me and many others to really think hard about the issue of how migration actually affects receiving countries and how we can understand better why people in these countries are so much against migration. So I will leave it at that. I would have loved to bring you a more positive message, but at least we know now that we have a lot more work to do. Now, to close the debate, let me briefly change things here. I would first of all like to thank all the speakers and the organizers, so the Phil and the Student Economic Review. As always, there will be a wine reception right over there, at which the judges will also communicate their decision. Later on, and I'm happy to see that things haven't changed a bit in the last 15 years, there will be drinks in Doyle's for anyone who is interested. Now, before we close the session, there will be a vote by acclamation. So I will invite everyone who is in favor of the motion to say aye, and everyone who is in favor of the opposition, or who is against the motion, say nay. So, let me call those in favor of the motion to confirm this by saying aye. Aye! Now let me call those who are against the motion by saying nay. Nay! No, I'll call it 50-50. We'll toss a coin there. Okay, thank you very much.